Snow doesn't lie. That's what the sheriff told the local paper 3 days after they found the body at Lake Corin. Snow doesn't lie. It remembers everything. Every step. Every hesitation. Every place a person stood still for just a second too long, deciding what to do next. And on the night Daniel Wexford died, the Snow at Lake Corin remembered 3 sets of footprints leading to his front door. Only 2 sets leading away. For 11 years, that single detail has haunted a small town in the mountains, has ended 2 marriages, has turned neighbors into strangers, and has never, not once, been explained. This is the case of the 3rd footprint. 2 suspects, 1 truth. And to this day, nobody knows which one of them is lying, or whether both of them are. Welcome back to Shelby's Den. Get comfortable. This one's going to take a while. Welcome back to Shelby's Den, the place where we dig into the cases that never made national headlines, but absolutely should have. If you're new here, we cover unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and stories that fell through the cracks of true crime coverage. So if that's your thing, hit subscribe and ring that bell, because we've got a lot more of these coming. Now, let's get back to the story. To understand what happened at that lake house, you have to understand the man who owned it. Daniel Wexford was 46 years old when he died, and by most measures, he built the kind of life people spend their whole lives chasing. He'd grown up middle class in a factory town 2 hours south, the kind of place where ambition either burns out early or burns hot enough to get you gone. Daniel got out. He studied finance, moved to the city, and by his early 30s had co-founded a real estate development firm, Wexford and Cole Properties, that turned rundown industrial blocks into luxury condos faster than the market could keep up with. By the time he was 40, Daniel Wexford was rich. Not nice car, rich. Rich enough that he bought 100 acres of lakefront property in the mountains, tore down the old fishing cabin that had stood there for 60 years, and built something that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine. Glass walls, cedar beams, a dock that stretched 50 feet into water, so still it looked like a mirror most mornings. He called it his quiet place, the one spot on earth where nobody needed anything from him. Except that wasn't quite true. 2 people needed things from Daniel Wexford very badly. And on the night he died, both of them were within a mile of that house. The first was his business partner, Marcus Cole. Marcus and Daniel had built the company together, brick by brick, starting in a rented office above a laundromat. For 15 years, their partnership was the stuff of local business legend, the cautious architect and the fearless dealmaker, the yin and yang that made Wexford and Cole one of the most successful private developers in the state. But legends age. And somewhere around year 12, the partnership started to crack. Marcus wanted to slow down, consolidate, protect what they built, ride out the next downturn conservatively. Daniel wanted to expand, to leverage everything they had into a massive new lakefront resort development that would either triple their net worth or bankrupt them both. The 2 men who had once finished each other's sentences started finishing each other's arguments. Instead, in front of investors, in front of staff, and eventually, according to at least 3 employees who later spoke to investigators, in a shouting match in the parking garage that nearly turned physical. 6 weeks before Daniel died, Marcus Cole filed paperwork to formally dissolve their partnership. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be expensive. And by every financial record recovered afterward, it was going to leave Marcus Cole, a man with 2 kids in private school and a mortgage on a house he could no longer really afford, significantly worse off than his former partner. The second person was Daniel's younger brother, Ethan. Ethan Wexford was 8 years younger than Daniel. And if you asked anyone in town to describe the two brothers, they'd tell you it was like describing two different species. Daniel was Polish and ambition. Ethan was the kind of guy who fixed motorcycles in his garage and hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. Their late father's estate, a modest but respectable inheritance, had been split unevenly between them when the old man died 5 years earlier in a will that Daniel himself had helped draft as executor. Ethan got a fraction of what Daniel received, ostensibly because Daniel had already provided for Ethan over the years with loans, most of which were never repaid, and most of which, according to Ethan, were never meant to be. The brothers hadn't spoken in nearly a year by the time of Daniel's death. Their last contact, recovered from Daniel's phone, was a voicemail from Ethan left 4 months prior, in which Ethan's voice slurred. If you believe the audio experts who later analyzed it, can be heard saying, quote, "You think you can just bury me the way you buried Dad's memory. One of these days, Danny, somebody's going to make you pay for what you take." Two men, two motives, two grudges that had been building for years, both reaching a breaking point in the same 6-month window. And on a January night with fresh snow falling over Lake Corin, both of them would end up walking the same quarter-mile stretch of private road that led to Daniel Wexford's front door. The timeline investigators eventually built, pieced together from cell tower data, security footage from a gas station 4 miles down the mountain road, and witness statements looked something like this. Daniel Wexford drove up to the lake house alone on the afternoon of January 14th, telling his assistant he needed a few days to think before finalizing the terms of the dissolution with Marcus Cole. He stopped for gas at 4:47 p.m. The station's grainy camera caught him buying a bottle of scotch and a pack of cigarettes, the second unusual, since by all accounts, Daniel had quit smoking 6 years earlier. He arrived at the lake house sometime around 5:30 p.m., based on a smart home log that recorded the garage door opening. Snow began falling heavily around 7 p.m. and continued on and off until nearly 2 a.m., which matters enormously, because it means any footprints made before 7 p.m. would have been partially or fully erased, while anything after that point would be preserved in fresh, undisturbed snow. At 9:14 p.m., Daniel's phone recorded an outgoing call to Marcus Cole. It lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Marcus, when questioned, said Daniel had called to vent about the dissolution paperwork, that the conversation was tense but not threatening, and that Daniel had, in Marcus's words, sounded like he'd been drinking, but he sounded like Daniel, not scared, not different. At 11:38 p.m., a neighbor roughly a half mile down the shoreline, an elderly widow named Corinne Halstead, one of the only other year-round residents on that stretch of the lake, told police she saw headlights turn onto the private road that led only to the Wexford property. She couldn't identify the vehicle. She said she almost didn't think anything of it, except that visitors at that hour, in that weather, were unusual enough that she mentioned it to her daughter the next morning, before anyone even knew Daniel was dead. Sometime after that, the exact time was never pinned down. Daniel Wexford was struck in the back of the skull with a blunt object, consistent with the shape and weight of a fireplace poker that was later found wiped clean and returned to its stand beside the hearth. He died, according to the coroner, almost instantly, sometime in what investigators call the midnight window between 11:30 p.m. and roughly 3 a.m. His body was discovered 2 days later on January 16th, when he failed to show up for a scheduled call with his attorney, and the attorney, unable to reach him, asked a local property caretaker to check the house. By the time anyone found him, another 18 hours of intermittent snowfall had come and gone. But here's the thing that made this case different from almost any other the county had seen. The last snowfall had stopped at 1:52 a.m. on the night of the 14th 15th. From that moment until the body was discovered, the ground around the house stayed frozen, untouched, and, crucially, was never disturbed by wind, rain, or a second snowfall. Which means that whatever happened at that house after 1:52 a.m. was frozen in place. Literally. When the state forensics team arrived, the responding officer, a 22-year veteran named Sergeant Elaine Trout, who would go on to lead the case for the next 4 years, made a call that likely preserved the single most important piece of evidence in the entire investigation. She had the entire footpath area around the house photographed, gridded, and cordoned off before a single other person was allowed near it. What they found, once the snow was properly mapped, was this. Footprint set A led from the tree line at the edge of the property down toward the house, stopping at a side window that looked into Daniel's study. The prints then turned and led to the front porch, up the steps, and stopped at the front door. This set was made by a boot roughly a men's size 10.5, with a distinctive wear pattern on the outer edge of the heel. Consistent, the state lab determined, with someone who walked with a slight outward roll of the foot, sometimes caused by an old ankle injury. Footprint set B approached from the private road, the same road Corinne Halstead had seen headlights on, walked directly to the front door, and then, after some time, led back to the road. This set was a size 11 boot with a nearly new tread pattern, no distinguishing wear. Footprint set C, and this is the one that would end up defining the entire case, appeared to originate from nowhere. It began abruptly at the edge of the porch, roughly 8 feet from the front door, as though someone had simply materialized there. The prints moved to the door, appeared to pause, and then led away, not back toward the road, and not back toward the tree line, but down along the frozen edge of the lake itself, where they continued for nearly 60 yards before vanishing onto a patch of wind-scoured ice too hard to hold an impression. 3 sets in, only 2 sets out. Set A stopped at the door and never left. Set B came and went back to the road. Set C appeared from nowhere, entered, and vanished onto the ice. Whoever made footprint set A, the boot with the distinctive rolling heel wear, never walked away from that house, and Daniel Wexford's body was found inside, alone, with no one else present, which left investigators with a puzzle that, on its face, seemed to answer itself, and then immediately unanswer itself the moment you look closer. When Sergeant Trout and her team pulled Marcus Cole in for his first formal interview, they weren't gentle about it. They had motive, the ugly, expensive divorce of a business partnership. They had a phone call at 9:14 p.m. that put him in direct contact with the victim hours before the estimated time of death. And when they searched Marcus Cole's mudroom 2 days later, under a warrant, they found a pair of work boots, size 10.5, with a wear pattern that an independent podiatric forensic examiner would later testify was, quote, consistent with, though not conclusively identical to, the wear pattern found in footprint set A. Marcus's version of events was this. After the phone call with Daniel at 9:14, he stayed home the rest of the night with his wife, Rebecca. He never left the house. He never drove up the mountain. The tense phone call, he insisted, was nothing new. He and Daniel had been having variations of that same argument for months. And while it ended with raised voices, it ended, in his telling, with Daniel laughing and saying something like, "We'll figure it out. We always do." Rebecca Cole corroborated her husband's alibi. She told investigators Marcus had been home all night, that they'd watched television together until nearly 11, and that she woke briefly around 1 a.m. and he was beside her in bed. But there were problems. First, cell tower data placed. Marcus's phone pinging off a tower roughly 6 miles from his home and roughly 9 miles from Lake Corin at 10:52 p.m., a location he could not explain, and one that was notably along a route that, if continued, would eventually reach the Lake Road. His attorney would later argue the tower ping was ambiguous and could reflect signal bounce, a common issue in mountainous terrain, and an expert witness for the defense agreed this was plausible. Second, the boots. While the podiatric match was suggestive, it was never conclusive. The specific tread pattern on Marcus's boots was a mass-produced model sold at more than 40 retail locations across the state, and the rolling heel wear was consistent with any number of people who'd had a similar old injury. Marcus, notably, had sprained his right ankle badly 7 years earlier playing recreational hockey, a detail confirmed by hospital records, which made him a plausible but not exclusive match. Third, and this is the detail that would end up eating at investigators for years, Marcus Cole had no alibi witness for the hours between roughly 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., the exact window Rebecca claimed to be asleep and unaware of her husband's whereabouts. If Marcus had driven up that mountain, met Daniel, argued, and struck him in a moment of rage-fueled desperation over the business dissolution, the timeline fit, the boots fit loosely, the motive fit perfectly. But if Marcus made footprint set A, then Marcus never left the house. And Marcus was very much alive, sitting in an interview room 3 days later. So either the footprints weren't his or somebody else was in that house too. Ethan Wexford's story was messier from the start, and messianism in an investigation tends to look a lot like guilt, whether or not it actually is. Ethan had no alibi at all. He lived alone in a rented cabin 20 minutes from the lake, worked occasional shifts at a motorcycle repair shop, and told investigators inconsistently across 3 separate interviews that he'd spent the night of January 14th mostly at home. Maybe went out for a drive. I don't really remember, man. It was a while ago, by the time he was first formally questioned, 17 days after the body was found. That delay itself became a point of suspicion. Investigators wanted to know why it took over 2 weeks to formally interview the victim's own brother, and the honest answer was almost administrative. Ethan wasn't initially considered a strong suspect because he had, on the surface, no direct financial motive tied to the business, and the inheritance dispute was old news by January. But then came the voicemail, the one where Ethan tells Daniel that somebody's going to make you pay. Once that recording surfaced, pulled from Daniel's phone records during a routine review, Ethan became suspect number 1 in the eyes of the public, even before he became a serious suspect in the eyes of investigators. Ethan's explanation for the voicemail was that it was said in anger, months earlier, during a fight about money that had nothing to do with violence. People say stuff like that all the time and don't mean it. Ask anybody. He told Sergeant Trout, visibly rattled during his second interview. What made Ethan genuinely dangerous as a suspect, though, wasn't the voicemail. It was what investigators found when they searched his cabin, a pair of boots, size 11, nearly new, purchased, according to a receipt found in a kitchen drawer, just 11 days before Daniel's death, from an outdoor supply store 40 minutes from the lake. Size 11, nearly new tread. That matched footprint set B, the one that came from the road, entered, and left back toward the road. If Ethan made set B, it meant Ethan was at that house. It meant Ethan lied repeatedly about his whereabouts that night. And it meant Ethan, who by his own admission resented his brother deeply enough to leave a voicemail threatening some form of reckoning, was inside that house sometime around the estimated window of death, and then walked away from it, back to his car, and drove home. and said nothing for over 2 weeks. Ethan's defense, when confronted with the boot evidence months later, was almost stranger than a denial would have been. He admitted, finally, in his 4th interview with a lawyer present, that yes, he had driven up to the lake house that night. He said he'd been drinking, that he wanted to confront Daniel about the inheritance one more time, face to face, to say my piece and be done with it. He said he arrived, knocked, and Daniel answered the door, alive, annoyed, but alive, and told him to sober up and go home. Ethan claimed he stood on the porch for a few minutes. They exchanged some heated words, and then he left. He said he never went inside the house. He said Daniel closed the door, and that was the last time he ever saw his brother. If true, that would put Ethan's visit sometime after Daniel's 9:14 p.m. call with Marcus, and would mean Ethan left Daniel alive. The problem, and it's a significant one, is that there is no way, using footprint analysis alone, to prove a negative. The prints show that whoever made set B went to the door and came back. They don't show what happened inside that doorway. They don't show whether the door was even opened. And investigators had no way to confirm Ethan's timeline against anyone else's, because there were no other witnesses. Except, of course, for whoever made the 3rd set. This is the part of the case that turned a fairly ordinary, if tragic, small-town homicide into a story that spread far beyond that mountain community. Because everything about Marcus Cole and Ethan Wexford, as suspicious as it all sounds, is at least explicable. People lie about alibis. People have ambiguous cell pings. People buying new boots for reasons that have nothing to do with murder. Footprint set C explains nothing. It only raises questions. Forensic snow analysis is a niche but genuinely established discipline, and the state brought in a specialist from a university research lab to formally examine the site before the melt made further study impossible. Her conclusions, delivered 6 weeks after the body was found, were as unsettling as anything in the entire case file. The depth and clarity of Set C's impressions indicated they were made by someone weighing roughly 140 to 160 pounds, wearing a smooth-soled boot or shoe with almost no discernible tread pattern, unusual for winter footwear in a snowy mountain climate, where most people wear boots with aggressive treads specifically to avoid slipping. The prints appeared abruptly at the edge of the porch, with no connecting trail leading to that point from any direction. Not the road, not the tree line, not the lake. It was, in her clinical language, and point of origin inconsistent with pedestrian approach from any location accessible on foot, within the time frame established by the snowfall record. In plainer terms, it looked like someone appeared out of thin air at the edge of that porch. There were 3 working theories, none of them supernatural, all of them deeply unsatisfying. Theory 1. The person who made Set C had already been on the property before the snow began falling at 7 p.m., perhaps hiding, waiting, or simply present for an innocent reason, and remained stationary in one spot long enough that snow accumulated around them without ever showing footprints leading to that spot, because they never moved from it until they finally stepped onto the porch after the last snowfall stopped. It's an unusual scenario, but not an impossible one. If someone stood still, sheltered somehow, for over 6 hours in freezing temperatures. Theory 2. The person arrived by boat. Lake Karn doesn't fully freeze most winters, only its shoreline edges, and a small boat or kayak launched from a point further down the lake could, in theory, have approached the property from the water, with the boater stepping directly onto the porch area from a dock or rocky outcropping. That wouldn't necessarily show tracks the same way open snow would. This theory gained some traction when investigators noted the direction Set C's exit trail took, straight toward the lake's edge, continuing along the frozen shoreline before disappearing onto wind-scoured ice, exactly where a boat might plausibly have been moored or where a person might have reboarded a small craft. Theory 3, the one Sergeant Trout herself favored, according to a retrospective interview she gave years later, is that the point of origin wasn't as mysterious as it looked, and that a partial reconstruction of the snowfall timeline suggested a much simpler explanation. This person had walked to the porch before 7 p.m., when the earlier, lighter dusting of snow could still have been disturbed and later recovered by the heavier snowfall that followed, essentially erasing the approach portion of the trail while preserving the exit portion made later, after the person left the porch following whatever encounter occurred inside. If Theory 3 is correct, it would mean the mysterious point of origin isn't mysterious at all. It's simply the limit of what the snow happened to preserve, an artifact of timing rather than an actual anomaly. It would also mean this third person could have arrived at almost any point in the evening, made contact with Daniel, and left sometime after the final snowfall stopped at 1:52 a.m., putting them squarely inside the most likely window for the time of death. The problem is that no boot, no shoe, no piece of footwear was ever recovered from any of the 3 suspects investigated over the following 4 years. That matched the smooth, low-tread pattern of Set C. It didn't match anything owned by Marcus Cole. It didn't match anything owned by Ethan Wexford. It didn't match footwear belonging to Daniel Wexford himself, whose own house shoes and outdoor boots were both cataloged and ruled out early in the investigation. Whoever made that third set of prints has never been identified, not conclusively, not to this day. Here's where the case gets even stranger, and it's a detail that didn't become public until nearly 2 years after Daniel's death, when a source close to the investigation, never officially named, leaked partial forensic reports to a regional true crime journalist covering the case. The coroner's report noted something odd about the crime scene that had nothing to do with footprints at all, based on blood spatter analysis and the specific angle of the fatal wound. The medical examiner determined that Daniel Wexford was struck by someone standing slightly below his eye line, consistent with an attacker roughly 5'6" to 5'8", notably shorter than both Marcus Cole, who stands 6'1", and Ethan Wexford, who stands 5'11". Neither suspect matched the estimated height of the attacker. The forensic snow specialist's earlier estimate of footprints said siege owner to 140 to 160 pounds, combined with typical proportions for that weight range, would plausibly put that individual in the 5'6" to 5'8" range. In other words, the physical evidence at the actual point of the killing blow lines up far more closely with the mysterious third person than with either of the 2 suspects who were formally investigated, interrogated, and, in Marcus Cole's case, very nearly charged. This detail alone should have redirected the entire investigation. And in fairness to Sergeant Trout and her team, it did shift resources for a time, a renewed canvass of the area, an attempt to identify anyone in Daniel Wexford's orbit, professional or personal, who matched that height and build, and who might have had access to a boat or reason to be near the lake that night. They found nobody, no romantic partner nobody knew about, no business rival with a personal grudge, no unresolved threat from Daniel's past that matched. The man who seemingly had 2 enemies close enough to kill him may have had a third, one nobody in his life. Not his employees, not his estranged brother, not his soon-to-be former business partner ever saw coming or has ever been able to name. For the first year after Daniel's death, most of the county and most of the investigators believed Marcus Cole did it. The motive was too clean, the business dissolution too bitter, the ambiguous cell tower ping too suggestive to ignore. A grand jury was convened 8 months after the murder to consider formal charges. It didn't return an indictment. The prosecution's case had 2 fatal weaknesses, and defense attorneys hammered both. First, the boot match was never more than consistent with, a phrase forensic experts use constantly, and one that juries, when properly informed, understand is a long way from identical to. Marcus's specific boots, when tested against the preserved cast of footprint set A, showed enough minor discrepancies in wear pattern that the state's own expert couldn't rule out a different pair of boots, sold by the same manufacturer, worn by someone else entirely. Second, and this is the argument that ultimately carried the day, the defense pointed out something the prosecution had no good answer for. If Marcus Cole made footprints set A, and set A never left the house, then Marcus Cole should have been found in that house, or his exit should be explained by one of the other 2 sets of prints. Neither fit. He couldn't be set B, whose owner was identified through boot purchase records as almost certainly Ethan. He couldn't easily be set C, given the estimated weight and height didn't match his 6'1" broad-shouldered frame at all. If Marcus made the prints that never left, how did he get home? To be in bed beside his wife by 1 a.m. without leaving a 4th trail. The state's theory that he'd retraced his own footsteps exactly, obscuring his exit within his entry trail, a technique that is technically possible but forensically almost undetectable and generally requires either extraordinary care or extraordinary luck, was plausible in theory but impossible to prove, and juries. The prosecutor later admitted in a local interview, "Don't like theories that require the killer to be that composed in the middle of what would have to be a violent, emotional act." Without an indictment, Marcus Cole was never formally charged. He and Rebecca divorced 14 months after Daniel's death, a separation both parties, notably, declined to publicly attribute to the case, though most of the town assumed otherwise. Marcus sold his stake in what remained of the business, moved out of state, and has not spoken publicly about the case in nearly 9 years. Ethan Wexford's path through the investigation took an even stranger turn. 18 months after Daniel's death, in what his own attorney would later call the worst decision of his life, Ethan, struggling with alcohol, isolated from what remained of his family, and reportedly deep in debt, gave an interview to a small podcast covering the case, in which he said, according to the recording later subpoenaed by investigators, something close to, "Maybe I did do it. Maybe I don't even remember. I was so drunk that night, man. Maybe I hit him and just blacked it out. I don't know anymore. Nobody believes me either way, so what does it matter what I say?" For a few frantic weeks, this confession reignited the entire case. Sergeant Trout brought Ethan back in for a formal interview under caution. But when pressed, under the structure of an actual interrogation rather than a rambling podcast conversation, Ethan's story collapsed back into what it had always been. He went to the door. Daniel was alive. They argued. He left. He said the podcast comments were just talk, the kind of self-destructive thing a person says when they've spent a year and a half being the prime suspect in their own brother's murder in the court of public opinion, whether or not the law ever formally charged them. No new physical evidence emerged from the confession, no corroborating detail that only the real killer could have known. Prosecutors ultimately declined to pursue charges based on it, concluding, in an internal memo later obtained through a public records request, that the statement was insufficiently reliable to support prosecution absent independent corroboration, essentially legal language for a devastated, possibly intoxicated man saying something self-destructive on a podcast isn't the same as a confession that holds up in court. Ethan Wexford has never been charged with any crime related to his brother's death. He still lives as of the last public record available in the same small town, though he no longer speaks to media and declined, through his attorney, to participate in any further interviews after 2022. While the public fixated on Marcus and Ethan, Sergeant Truth's team spent years quietly chasing the identity of whoever made footprint set C. The person the physical evidence increasingly suggested might be the one who actually delivered the fatal blow. They investigated Daniel's romantic history and found nothing conclusive. No secret relationship, no jilted former partner who matched the estimated height and build. They investigated his business dealings beyond Marcus Cole and found several disgruntled former clients and at least 2 lawsuits from investors who'd lost money on a development that collapsed 3 years prior, but nobody who could be placed anywhere near Lake Corin on the night in question, and nobody who matched the physical profile. They pulled records on every boat registered on Lake Corin and interviewed every owner. They canvassed hunting cabins and hikers' lodges within a 5-mile radius, hoping to find someone who might have seen a stranger on foot or heard a boat engine on the water that night. Corinne Halstead, the elderly neighbor who saw the headlights at 11:38 p.m., was interviewed no fewer than 6 times over the following 4 years. She never wavered from her original account and never reported seeing or hearing anything else. No second vehicle, no boat engine, nothing that would help narrow the window for Set C's arrival or departure. In the 9th year after Daniel Wexford's death, Sergeant Elaine Truth retired. In her final interview on the case, given to a regional newspaper doing a retrospective piece, she said something that has since become something of an unofficial epitaph for the entire investigation. "I've worked cases with no suspects, and I've worked cases with too many suspects. This is the only case in my career where I had 2 people who could have done it, evidence suggesting maybe neither of them did, and a phantom nobody could ever find who might be the only one who actually knows what happened in that house. Somewhere out there is a person who was on that porch, who left those tracks, who walked away toward that lake and just kept walking into a life nobody has ever connected back to that house. And every year that passes, the odds of finding them get smaller. I hate that. I hate leaving it like this. But I can't manufacture evidence that isn't there. So let's lay it all out one more time, the way the evidence actually sits, not the way it's convenient to arrange it. Marcus Cole had the strongest motive of anyone connected to Daniel Wexford, a business partnership collapsing in a way that stood to devastate him financially, an ambiguous cell tower ping placing him closer to the lake than he claimed to be, and boots that were a partial, though inconclusive, match to the footprints that never left the house. But those same footprints raise an impossible question. If he made them, how did he get home without a trace? And his general build doesn't match the physical profile suggested by the fatal wound. Ethan Wexford had a long simmering grudge, a documented threat on Daniel's own voicemail, no reliable alibi, and, by his own eventual admission, was physically present at the house that night, matching footprint set B almost exactly through the boot purchase record. But his account, however unreliable and however many times it shifted, has remained fundamentally consistent on the core point. He says Daniel was alive when he left. And there is no physical evidence, no blood, no trace DNA, nothing recovered from Ethan's vehicle, clothing, or home that ever contradicted that claim. And then there's footprint set C, the person whose physical profile most closely matches the actual mechanics of the killing blow. The person who left no name, no motive on record, no explanation for how they arrived or where they went. The person who, if Theory 3 about the snowfall timing is correct, could have been in that house for any length of time that night, could have arrived before either Marcus or Ethan, could have arrived after both of them left, could have been the one holding that fireplace poker in the final, fatal moment. There are broadly three narratives that fit the evidence, and to this day, nobody, not Sergeant Trout, not the county prosecutor's office, not any of the independent journalists and amateur investigators who've spent a decade picking this case apart online, has been able to prove which one is correct. Narrative 1. Marcus Cole drove to the lake house sometime after his phone call with Daniel, confronted him over the dissolution, and in a moment that escalated faster than either of them expected, struck the fatal blow, then meticulously retraced his own footsteps back to his vehicle to obscure the fact that he'd ever left. A difficult but not impossible feat for someone in a state of adrenaline-fueled panic, trying to protect everything he had left. Ethan's visit either happened before this, meaning Daniel really was alive when Ethan saw him, or Ethan's visit never happened the way he described at all. Footprints set C, in this version, is unconnected to the murder. Perhaps a hiker, a trespasser, someone entirely unrelated who happened to cross the property earlier that night and left before or arrived after the fatal encounter, never realizing what had occurred. Narrative 2. Ethan Wexford's account is a careful, partial truth. He did go to the door. Daniel did answer. But the argument that followed didn't end with Ethan walking calmly back to his car. It ended with Ethan, intoxicated and finally out of patience after years of resentment, following Daniel inside, where things went further than he's ever admitted, whether accidentally or not. In this version, footprints set B's return trail to the road is real, but the story of what happened between the door opening and Ethan leaving is incomplete, shaped by shame, alcohol, and self-preservation rather than by any of the physical evidence contradicting it, because so little physical evidence from inside the house was ever definitively tied to a specific person's presence. Narrative 3, and it's the one that the physical evidence, cold and clinical as it is, arguably supports most strongly, is that neither Marcus nor Ethan struck the fatal blow at all. That both men did exactly what they said. Marcus had a tense phone call and never left home. The ambiguous tower ping nothing more than the mountainous signal bounce his expert witness described. Ethan went to the porch, argued with his very much alive brother, and left exactly as he always insisted. His year of increasingly erratic and self-destructive behavior, nothing more than the guilt of a man who never got to make peace with his brother before someone else made sure he never could. And sometime in the hours that followed, before Ethan's visit, after it, or in a window neither man was present for, a third person, matching a height, weight, and shoe profile that has never been connected to anyone in Daniel Wexford's known life, approached that porch, was let inside or let themselves in, and left Daniel Wexford dying on the floor of the home he built specifically to be the one place he thought he was safe. If narrative 3 is true, then somewhere out there, maybe still in that region, maybe 1,000 miles away, maybe under a name that isn't the one that would ever appear in any file connected to this case, is a person who has never been a suspect, never been publicly named, and has quietly lived an entire additional decade of life since the night they walked away from that lake, out onto the ice, and vanished from every record that has ever existed. 11 years later, the case of Daniel Wexford remains formally open, though functionally cold. Sergeant Trout's retirement left the file with a new detective who, as of the most recent public update from the department, described it as not a priority case in the traditional sense, but not one we've given up on either. New forensic technology gets better every year, and sometimes cold cases get solved by evidence nobody could process properly a decade ago. Marcus Cole has never been charged. He has never publicly been cleared either. The grand jury's failure to indict is not the same as innocence in the eyes of the law. And he has spent over a decade now living with a level of public suspicion that neither confirms nor denies what actually happened. An unresolved status, he has reportedly told friends, is its own kind of prison sentence. Ethan Wexford has never been charged. His podcast comments still circulate online, endlessly dissected by amateur sleuths who alternately treat them as a smoking gun and as the understandable ramblings of a grieving, guilt-racked man who has spent over a decade being publicly tried by strangers on the internet for a crime the actual justice system was never able to prove he committed. And footprints said see the phantom, the third visitor, the person whose physical profile matches the murder weapon's trajectory better than either named suspect, has never been identified at all. Not a name, not a face, not a single confirmed sighting before or after that night. Whoever it was walked onto that porch and then walked out onto the ice of a half-frozen lake in the middle of a January night and simply kept going into a life that has never once, in 11 years, intersected with this case again. Snow doesn't lie, Sergeant Trout said, but snow only remembers what it's given the chance to see. And somewhere in those 6 hours of falling snow at Lake Corin, in the gaps between what fell and what didn't, in the difference between a trail that started at 7 p.m. and one that seemed to start from nowhere, the truth of what happened to Daniel Wexford is still out there. 2 suspects, 3 footprints, and a truth that, 11 years on, still belongs to nobody but the person who was standing on that porch when the snow stopped falling. If you were investigating this case, who would you look at first? Marcus, with the motive and the ambiguous alibi? Ethan, with the grudge and the shifting story? Or the phantom on the porch, the one piece of evidence nobody has ever been able to explain? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every one of them, and on a case like this, sometimes it's the audience that spots the detail the investigators missed. If this is your first time here, welcome to Shelby's Den. We cover cases just like this one every week. The ones that don't come with a tidy ending. The ones that stay with you long after the video's over. Subscribe if you want to keep digging into cases like this one with me. And if you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you. Genuinely. These deep dives take a long time to put together, and it means something that you stayed for the whole thing. Stay safe. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.